So we are 2 weeks now since Russia invaded Ukraine. We're still gripped to our phones. We're still gripped to the news to kind of find out what is happening next. Some really kind of tragic news coming from the country now. Only yesterday, the day before, we seen that a hospital was bombed, a children's hospital, and lots of talk now whether or not that was a war crime. We've got someone on we're chatting to every week, Dr. Alex McKenzie. He's from the University of Liverpool, lecturer in international politics. Alex, how have you kind of felt this past week? Because it does seem to be escalating and getting much worse now over there.
A lot's happened, of course, this week. We initially saw slow advances. I don't think anything like what the Russians expected. But now what we've seen is them escalate and use some very significant weapons and use some methods that would be or are quite questionable this week. It wouldn't surprise me if they escalate it further, of course, over the next few weeks. And what we can expect, I think, is probably an attack on Kiev. I believe they solved some logistical problems last week, and they seem to be doing rather better in the south than in the north.
Okay, Alex. Obviously, there was a children's hospital hit. We're seeing lots of kids now displaced, but lots of kids injured, and some of the scenes on newspapers, on news reports, are just really shocking and so heartbreaking. If he is attacking civilian buildings, communities, and hospitals, surely that's a step further.
Absolutely, they're not supposed to target civilians specifically at all. And what they've claimed, actually, I was reading Sergei Lavrov's report of it before, and he's claiming, actually, people had been taken out to the hospital. There were no patients there. This was actually taken by Ukrainian radicals. This is what they're telling us. But of course, I'm very reluctant to believe anything that they say. But yes, civilian targeting should be avoided. That's what's expected of states at war.
Chemical warfare, there's talk about that again, about potentially chemicals being used in Ukraine by Putin. Is that looking like that could happen?
They're claiming that there's an American program of some kind in cooperation with Ukraine. I wouldn't believe it. I find it very unlikely that this is the case. They have, of course, worked with states that have used chemical weapons in the past. We talked about Syria, of course, in the Syrian conflict years ago. I just fear that this is a lot of misinformation, and it's very difficult, I think, to know what to actually believe in this war. But that's all part of it.
We've seen this week some really big international companies, the likes of Starbucks, McDonald's. You mentioned last week some of the big shopping stores are now all closed in Russia. It sounds a bit kind of on the comical side. Well, I can't get a Big Mac, so that's really going to ruin my day. But on a serious note, that is really going to have an impact on Russian people, isn't it? That's really going to get them riled. That these big brands are now closing shop, and some of their towns are deserted as we speak.
This is what I've been thinking as well in terms of how this actually is going to affect people on the ground. So, it's not just that, it's people losing their jobs, isn't it? And it's this kind of unrest that I suspect it gets more complicated than this as well, because they've also suspended foreign exchanges as well. So what's going to even happen with the ruble? What's going to happen with the currency? They don't seem to care what the people think, but that could get very unpleasant as the conflict goes on. And people are, of course, as we've seen on the streets, have been protesting. How big that has to get before that becomes unmanageable for the state, and whether it will get there, is, I think, an interesting question.
Okay, we've got to talk about people leaving the Ukraine. It's great to see them getting out, but obviously it's really worrying as well, because a lot of them have got nowhere to go. Poland have been incredible. Lots of other countries have too. Just fill us in on that and where we're up to in the UK in terms of accepting refugees from the Ukraine.
Well, to be very frank, we have done very poorly. Apparently, it's a very complicated system. Thousands of people, I think over 20,000 people have applied, and I think there have been the excess of 900 plus visas. That's my understanding. By contrast, places like Poland, it's no surprise it's next to the Ukraine, of course, have taken over 1 million. We have been very slow, and I fear that this is just a case of waiting to see what the public thinks, rather than actually attempting or trying to do the right thing under these circumstances. And I think we've seen this several times before from our current government.
We're seeing lots of people going over volunteering. We got some people from Liverpool this week who have headed over to Poland, which is great to see. But people from all over the country have kind of rushed to the aid of people from Ukraine. Just tell us about that. Is that a good thing? Should we be doing more of that? How can we help as people watching this crisis unfold?
So the government is, of course, saying that people shouldn't go. That's the first thing. Well, we saw kind of different positions from the government in the past week, but I think they've kind of settled around people shouldn't go. To help, they've generally been advised to give money rather than go themselves. Although there is a report today, I think, of a Scottish granddad of 61 going. That's one of the reports I've heard today. But there's a long history of war volunteers, right? In fact, if we go back to like the Spanish Civil War, we go back to 30,000 plus people traveling to take part. We go to Islamic State. We have over 40,000 from a number of different states, and people would see, of course, those events very different ways. So my understanding is that give money, absolutely. I can talk a lot more about foreign fighters, but I think that'll become clearer, and their role, or volunteers, as the conflict progresses.
I love the way, and it's really heartwarming to see so many people's reaction to this. Obviously it's a reaction that we don't want to have in the first place, but the good side of humanity does come out in situations like this as well, doesn't it, Alex? Some of the things we've seen in Liverpool alone in terms of donations and the amount that people have pledged, the amount of clothes people have delivered and stuff. That is a heartwarming kind of side of war, isn't it? I suppose.
We've seen a huge amount, of course, and it's very impressive and very kind and generous of people to help other people who are in such dismay at the moment, as is the case right now. And I mean, it's been the case a number of times in conflicts in the past. Unfortunately, of course, there's also some quite unpleasant sides to that also. But what we're seeing at present is encouraging to see under these circumstances. I agree.
Okay, we could literally chat to you all day, Alex. We are going to chat to you every single week now, just to give us a little update. Just finally, just tell us in your mind, and I know you can't predict this, God, 50%, never mind 100%, but what is the next move from Putin? What will happen next? What will Zelensky do next? Just kind of sum it up as to expect the next 7 days to go.
I suspect, what I said before, we're going to see them increasingly make progress in the east. I believe the south and east, I believe they're in better positions in those. The whole advance seems to be better organized. So I expect more progress there. On Kiev, I expect an attack on Kiev, or that's what I've read over the next few days, because they seem to resolve some of the problems there, or they're going to heighten the attacks on there. But where we go from there, I mean, if this is the progress that's being made, it's going to take a very long time. We're already seeing protests in some of the cities that have been occupied as well. So where does that go if they're leaving troops behind to look after these cities also?
Okay, Dr. Alex McKenzie, he's a lecturer in international politics at the University of Liverpool. Thank you so much for the update. You do really break it down so well, and you certainly help me understand, so I'm sure you are doing with a lot of people watching and listening.
Thanks very much.